Okay, in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to use the UV mapping channels in 3D Studio Max to help apply different textures mapped at different scales for different objects in the scene. Specifically in this case, we're going to create a nice concrete wall with some grungy water splashing at the bottom, and the concrete is going to be mapped at one scale and the grunge texture is going to be mapped at another. So to get started, we're going to create a basic wall object here of random height and width, and I am using a concrete texture that's just a basic tileable concrete texture that we have, and I've just created a basic V-Ray material that you can see has the concrete map in the diffuse slot, and that's going to be applied to our concrete wall. Make sure you've got your show textures on, and you'll see that the default UV mapping is pretty stretched just to the proportions of the box, not very accurate. So we're going to add a UV map modifier. We'll just use a simple box mapping which defaults to the exact same mapping that was present, but we're going to adjust the length, width, and height of this to be equidistant. And we're going to use a value of 64 scene units, which in this case are inches. So there we have a much more evenly scaled representation of our concrete texture there. Now, we're going to create another sample texture real quickly that's going to have our grunge texture as a diffuse map. And we will apply that to our scene object temporarily. And you'll note that this is actually not too bad, but you see how it looks, it's a little compressed on the X axis. So what we would really want to do would be to add another UV map channel. To where it is stretched more evenly across the front. And you can scale it, you can resize it manually however you want. But I like it. So this is what we started with, and I think it needs to be a little bit more in this range. So it's got some scaling in the x-axis, which is not even when relative to our concrete texture. So the way that we're going to bring these both two together and use the 3D Studio Max mapping channel is that we're going to set this second UV map right here. You have a channel option. We're going to create that as the second map channel. Now, to demonstrate how this gets put together, we're going to take our concrete texture here. It has the concrete material that has the concrete texture in the diffuse channel. We're going to create a standard mix map here. You're going to keep that concrete. And for our second color, we're going to use a bright green just so we can see what's going on here. And in our mix amount, we're going to use our grunge texture, which is basically just saying we want to mix these maps using this as a map channel. Sorry, a mask channel. So let's see where we're at right now. We're going to apply this texture to our box. Boom. And we can immediately tell that we've got concrete where we really wanted the green and green where we wanted concrete. So all you have to do is come into your mask map here look for the Output tab and click Invert. And there you have it. So, a quick rendering will show you that. We have this thing mapped out in such a way that it's going to show this grunge texture on the bottom of our wall object and the concrete on the top. Now, in the real world, we're not going to want to use this green texture here. We would want to use a sort of a darker, sort of like a grungy dirt kind of texture, but this is for visual demonstration, so the bright green kind of pops. So, to demonstrate how the map channels come into play here, I'm going to dive back into this material, and you can see, I'll show it on the concrete, and we're going to use this map in our viewport. And right here is the map channel option, and you need your settings set to explicit map channel. And you can see the scaling here if you look closely. Right now this is using the first UV map that we have set to our map channel 1. And if you change that, it's going to use our second UV map, which is set to channel 2. So the first map was intended for the concrete, so we're going to leave the concrete map channel at 1, which is going to keep it with that equidistant scaling. And then for our grunge texture, you can see it's still got that sort of squished x-axis scaling. So we're going to use map channel 2, which is going to scale that out for us, again using the second UV map. Now you can see here, if you were to change the scaling of this, it will affect your concrete, the mask, the grunge mask. But if you were to change the scaling of the first one, it's going to have no effect at all because it's a different map channel. And that is, in a nutshell, how you use mapping channels in 3D Studio Max to apply multiple textures to single objects using differently scaled UV map modifiers. And just for those who are curious of how the rest of this material might actually go together, I'm going to create a quick demonstration of that, which we're going to use a composite material with 2 layers. They're both going to be instances of our concrete texture. And what we're going to do here in this composite is we're going to use a multiply modifier, which is really going to create a darker version of our concrete map. You could use color correction. You could use anything to create a darkened version. Honestly, you could mix it with a 0 RGB color value as well, just a solid black. However, I tend to like to use multiply because it retains a little bit of the color value, which I like. So we now have that as our mix channel. And as you can see, that's going to show up sort of a dark grunge at the bottom here. And if you need it to be a little bit darker, you can stack another multiply on top of that in the composite. So now you have like a really dark grunge at the bottom. And there you have it, a grungy concrete wall with textures applied utilizing the UV mapping channels in 3D Studio Max.